If your role involves getting clients and you don't share online, then where are you going to get your clients from to some degree? In today's market, you need to have a online presence. People don't want to be, known as braggarts. They don't want their peers to perceive them that way. So this fear then prevents them from wanting to share more online or just brag about themselves in general.
You have to have a strategy. You can't just post willy-nilly. You've got to have a strategy about what you actually post. So who wants to basically end up there? And it could be terminally damaging for your personal brand. But, we would never tell a client to do that.
Let's zoom through. Welcome to The Experience Exchange, the podcast for people who've spent decades building careers and are now asking, what's next? I'm Pippa Woodhead. In this series, we're having honest conversations about second acts, what it takes to reinvent yourself, how to rebuild credibility without the title, and why your experience still matters even when everything feels different. Let's get started. Welcome to The Experience Exchange. If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you're in a moment of transition. You're starting a second act, maybe you've left a big role or you're building something new. And you know, in theory, that you probably should be using LinkedIn to let people know what you're working on now so that the right people can find you. But when it comes to actually doing it, it feels awkward. Maybe it even feels a bit cringe, or you're just not sure how to put your best foot forward. This episode is for you. Today we're talking about self-promotion in your second act, why it can feel so uncomfortable for people, what actually works, how to show up online in a way that feels credible, human, and aligned with who you are now. I'm joined by Professor Andy Yap, Professor of Organisational Behaviour at INSEAD. Andy works with senior leaders on executive presence, influence, and communication, and he's co-authored research on self-promotion and how it affects the people around you. I'm also joined by Chris Reed, who many of you may recognise from LinkedIn as the only CEO with a mohawk. Chris is the founder of Black Marketing and spends his days helping leaders and founders figure out how to show up online in ways that actually land. Chris, when an executive comes to you and says, I know I need to be posting, but I feel really awkward, what's the first thing you say to them?
Do it. I mean, literally, it's do it, because unless you do it, you don't know what works and what doesn't work. You have no data on what will work for your particular feed. So, for example, if someone has left their company and they come to us, they start a company and they say, I'm an entrepreneur now. Now I need to basically market myself because maybe previously they were in a company where they couldn't post or they weren't allowed to post or they're very careful about posting. Mm-hmm. The key is to post. And if they don't know what to post, then we normally say to them, well, look, what do you want to talk about? What clients are going to be impressed by what you say? And then we create a content strategy for them, which basically says, one of your posts can be about the company, but we operate a 4-1-1 strategy. So one post about the company, one post about basically your industry, and 4 posts that have nothing to do whatsoever with your company or what you do, but it's something about you personally, about your passion, or about something locally, like a topical, that's going viral at the time, for example, about Singapore. For example, if you're in Singapore, or Hong Kong, if you're in Hong Kong, it has to be local, because LinkedIn basically feeds your posts to the locality first before they go viral. If they go viral, they go beyond that. If they don't go viral, they just stay within Singapore itself. And that's the way basically LinkedIn works in terms of suggesting people's feed to people. So if you think you're going to influence someone in America or UK by posting in Singapore, no, your post dies because no one sees it in those countries. And so the only people who see it are people in Singapore who don't care about either America or United Kingdom, for example. 20% of our clients don't actually live in the place that their LinkedIn says, but their clients come from that particular place.
Oh.
So they have to change the location, because what happens is LinkedIn then feeds those content to the locality. They suggest that person to people in that locality. People in that locality then suggest they connect. And if they don't have that, then they're basically targeting the wrong people in the wrong country. So you have to be quite sophisticated about how you do that. But the key amongst the 4-1-1 is basically personal posts. Personal posts, personal posts, personal posts will always get more traction than any other posts. But we advise people not to do company posts, not to spam company posts, and especially not to do too many in one go. Some people just do them all the time and they just get no engagement, not even a like. Not even their friends like it anymore because they've unfollowed them. And LinkedIn just basically says it's spam. We're not going to show your post to anybody.
Someone coming from corporate, where maybe they might be used to doing more corporate posts, the personal posts are going to be the ones that feel most uncomfortable.
Without a doubt. Especially if you have imposter syndrome, and especially if you're an introvert. And that's what we specialize in bringing that out of people and saying, look, you've come to us because you know even though you have imposter syndrome, or even though you're an introvert, you know you have to post because now you're an entrepreneur, or now you're a fractional leader, or now you're a keynote speaker and you have, no help, or you're a coach. You need clients. And the best way to get clients is to post on LinkedIn. So someone says, oh, I need your help. Oh, I need your service. So if you don't post, you don't get the business. And then what are you going to do? So literally you're doing it because you know there's a need to actually do it. But it's the hardest thing to possibly do. And that's why my team are very good actually in basically coaching along, talking to you, what you feel comfortable, what you don't feel comfortable. Some people love to talk about their family. Some people love to talk about their passions. Some people won't. They just say, family's off limits. They won't talk about my kids, won't talk about my, partners, whatever they are. Nothing about that. I just want to talk about the company. And we say to them, but you do realize the engagement won't be very good. And we warn them about that. And after a couple of months doing this, they go, my engagement's doing really bad. It's like, well, we did tell you it's just been really bad. And then they say, oh, should we do a personal post? Just to prove to you that it works. And the personal post is like, Ding! And they'll get like 100,000 views. The personal post, they go, oh, wow, you were right. So, oh, no shit. We've done this for 14 years. I know what we're doing. I've seen the data. We've done thousands of clients all over the world. And personal post with a good story will always be the number one post for that particular person.
Yeah. Andy, what's going on psychologically? This discomfort that people have posting, what's actually going on?
Well, there are norms of modesty. And senior professionals, they like to let their work speak for themselves. And so because they feel uncomfortable. And more importantly, people don't want to be, known as braggarts. They don't want their peers to perceive them that way. So this fear then prevents them from wanting to share more online or just brag about themselves in general. Now, for senior leaders, it's very tricky though, because if you share too much about yourself, you impression manage too much, you brag too much, people think you're insecure as well. So all these different norms or these potential ways that people's impressions of you, they're generally more negative, are going to prevent people from wanting to share about themselves, share about who they are, their strengths and their accomplishments. And so to some degree, people need to overcome that, as Chris mentioned. But context matters. Where you impression manage, where you brag, where you share about your own achievements matter. Whether you do it in a boardroom, the context is very different compared to when in a pitch where you're supposed to describe more about who you are and the contributions you're going to bring versus online. They're all very different. So you have to look at context, you got to look at audience before you think about what you share about.
I feel like there might be a bit of potential conflict because you're like, just post, and you're like, yeah, but you have to actually be quite careful
because
about
his
what
context
you
is
post.
about on LinkedIn and on social media. You in some ways you have to share a little bit about it. But again, depends on who you are.
Yeah.
If your role involves getting clients and you don't share online, then where are you going to get your clients from to some degree? In today's market, you need to have a online presence.
Yeah.
But if you're a senior leader in an organization, you don't necessarily is someone who is more outward facing. You got to start thinking about whether you want to share that in the first place. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There are many ways and many forms of social media you can use. There's LinkedIn, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, all those different things. So you need to think about your audience and your outlet and why in the world you want to share in the first place. Once you get that right, that's when you decide on what you share about.
Yeah.
But as Chris mentioned, if you're running a business and you want more people to know about your business, then LinkedIn is a great way to potentially do it. I'm not working for LinkedIn, just in case you're wondering.
Ultimately, people buy people. So if they don't get to know you, then what do? I'll give you a great example. If you go to a networking event, you spend the first couple of minutes going and say, what do you do? What do you do? And then you move on to, so when did you come to Singapore? Oh, like that football team. Oh, what kind of music do you like? You don't just talk about the business the whole time, because if you did, you'd have no friends. You'd literally have no friends. So when I pitch people, and I spend 2 hours with them at, say, Brotsit, for example, I spend probably the first 20 minutes or so talking about LinkedIn and what they can do on LinkedIn. And then we move on to other things, because ultimately it'll be the other things part where they decide whether they trust me, whether they want to do business with me, whether they want to buy my services. It won't be the business one, because they already know my credentials and they've already pointed out what we can do and pointed out what they're not doing. That's the easy bit. Getting someone to then step over the next line and say, I trust this person with my content and my outreach, because we do everything for you, even if you approve it, is key. But one thing that I think Andy was relating to there as well is criticism. People do not like getting criticism, especially on LinkedIn, because they think, I post and I get criticized. Like, well, yeah, because it's social media. I'm afraid you can't stop that. But we have clients, or we've not had clients, because people said, I don't want to get any negative comments, so we can't post then. So it was goodbye, because I literally can't help you. If you don't basically take it on the chin and have some rhino skin and basically say, you're going to get people who disagree with you, and some of them aren't very nice, despite the fact it's on LinkedIn, so you can see where they work, you can see who you both know, you can see who their boss is, who their clients is, but people like to criticize. And so if you can't do that, then you really shouldn't post.
But you post quite controversial things. So I'm
Correct.
not surprised you get people, but I don't think I'm, as you were saying that, I was thinking, God, have I had many negative comments? Don't think I have had many. I'm not posting about anything inflammatory.
But then, to be devil's advocate here, Pippa, you don't get many comments on your posts. So the reason I create polarizing posts is I get more comments than anyone else does in Singapore. And you can look at my data for that. I don't get the most views because views are vanity metrics. I don't get the most likes because, again, likes are vanity metrics. But under the new LinkedIn algorithm, the Brew 360 algorithm, it's about conversation. It's about comments. It's not about likes. In fact, they're now downgrading posts which gets likes and views, and they're upgrading posts which get comments and conversations. That's why all my posts particularly about Singapore, for example, will get dozens and dozens, sometimes hundreds and hundreds of comments, people having a conversation. And often they will disagree, but they'll disagree in the right way. And if they disagree in the wrong way, I'll just take them out. Because I have to keep it a safe space for people to willingly say, I disagree with Chris, but I don't want to get criticized for it. But I welcome that as long as you do it in a constructive way. You're not abusive or you're not personally abusive. So it's all about context, as Andy mentioned before, and making sure it's a civilized matter. And on LinkedIn, it's easier, I would say, than any other platform. It's why I'm not on the other platforms, because I can see who you are. And that can happen too. So people are wary about posting on LinkedIn for that very reason.
If we're thinking in context of our audience, it'll be people who maybe they've been corporate for many years, they're moving on to do something else, they're pivoting into something new, maybe starting their own business, they want to coach, they want to do philanthropy, whatever it is that's coming next. They're probably not going to be posting the kind of things that's getting a lot of back and forth. They just want to let people know, this is what I'm working on, this is the value I bring, this is the stories.
Yeah, but that won't get any engagement.
But see, the business is different though.
Yeah.
So for his business, he needs traction. He needs a lot of people getting awareness and all that. And we know it's very clear across all social media, highly emotional content, highly opinionated content gets the most traction. Now, for you and I maybe, or even for myself, I don't want that kind of traction. I don't need likes. I don't need too many comments on my LinkedIn. And I suspect for many of your listeners, they may not be in a business to just get likes and comments. And so for that, you then have to then figure out what works best for you and for your purpose of going on social media. The moment people realize that your purpose is something completely commercial and not revealing who you really are, because in social media, you get a chance to basically tailor your identity. In the real world, in multiple settings, people read, and if they see you, they're inconsistent across settings, they realize that, maybe you're not very authentic. In social media, you're curating that. Again, because of that, people at the back of their mind, okay, you then wanted to present those things, and these are the things that you want people to know about. And so if you do it too much, to the extent where, people think it's fake or it's too safe, it won't work. But at the same time, it's very opinionated, then you get a lot of traction. But then you got to think about your own jobs and your own organizations where they're comfortable with you saying some of those things, for example. And then you have to be very, very mindful about that.
Yeah.
And you also have to realize that I know full well that when I do a polarizing opinion, that some people will be so annoyed they won't do business with me. But I also know that I'll get loads of people over here who love what I say, who will do business with me as a result of it. So you've got to weigh this up. If there's obviously too much of this and not enough of this, then you don't have a business anymore. But if you got enough of this, outweigh this, you can do it.
So that's your strategy.
That's my strategy.
Yeah. It makes
But it's
sense.
not all my clients' strategy. So if they want to get headhunted, for example, I'll give an example. We got someone recently headhunted from a bank in Singapore to a bank in Saudi Arabia. Now, obviously, if they're going into a bank in Saudi Arabia, you can't start doing beer posts. You can't start talking about Metallica. You can't start talking about, government stuff and politics. You can't be very, very safe. So that's exactly what we did. And we got this guy a very nice job in Saudi Arabia by not doing that. And by chance, he said when he got headhunted for this, they actually said to him, we were going to pick this other guy, but he kept on posting about having a beer. And it's like, you're going to Saudi Arabia where they don't sell beer unless you go to a certain hotel. So it literally put off the bank in Saudi Arabia from appointing this guy because of that. He's not really going to fit into the culture. Whereas what we'd done is basically hone this guy's personal branding and content marketing down to appeal specifically to a bank in Saudi Arabia.
So if you have a very specific goal like that, like you work in a bank in Singapore and you want to work in a bank in Saudi Arabia, what sort of things are you posting online? And will your current employer not be suspicious? This person keeps talking about Saudi finance.
Well, first of all, we changed their location to Saudi or Dubai, as I mentioned before. If you change your location, the people in Singapore...
How can they do that when their current location...
So we just changed the location, and basically people in Singapore no longer see their feed, but people in Saudi Arabia will see their feeds. They start getting connection to people in Saudi Arabia, not in Singapore anymore. And then people in Saudi Arabia or Dubai, we have had a few in Dubai, for example. Suddenly Dubai Dubai, LinkedIn starts suggesting them to other people and vice versa. They get build up more connections. Well, oh, you're in Dubai. Oh, let's have a meeting. Oh, I'm CEO, but you're a financial expert. Now, we're not saying this guy says, oh, I want to join a bank in Saudi Arabia, but we are talking about, oh, well, I think the trend in Dubai for financial services is very interesting. I think Saudi Arabia is particularly interesting. And then someone in Dubai or Saudi Arabia goes, oh, that's interesting. He's clearly an expert. And they look at his LinkedIn. Oh, he's got 25 years experience. I wonder if he'd be open to joining us in Saudi Arabia. And then we follow up.
Then you see that his location is tagged to Saudi Arabia. Does he already live here?
But that's where you have to go with the algorithm. And also that person has to be comfortable. We've basically changed a couple of people and they wouldn't move it. And we pointed out that basically they'd have to move it. And so basically after a couple of months of not getting much traction in that area, they moved it. They got a job within a month.
Oh, wow,
because suddenly people in Dubai, this was the one in Dubai's marketing person in Dubai. She got a job in Dubai because we changed the location to Dubai, even though she was still in Singapore.
But also, sorry, we're going slightly on a tangent, but this is actually quite interesting. Is that not, so say I lead a team in a bank and I notice that one of my people in my team has changed their location to Saudi Arabia, but we're sitting here. Like, you'll notice if it's someone in your team, won't you?
You would, yeah. So it really could only be done if you either resigned or you've decided you want to go or you want to be headhunted or you're quite happy that they find this out or you're on gardening leave or one of those things. So I'm not suggesting someone who works for somebody else suddenly change their location.
That's what I was confused.
You know, I fancy working in Zurich. I'll change myself in Zurich now. And your boss says, do you live in Zurich now and you commute to Singapore? It's like, no.
Okay. Very interesting. Really interesting some of the tactics that you can use. Andy, so you teach executive presence and influence. What translates when you're teaching someone about showing up in a boardroom? Like what carries over into social media?
So I think the things that are consistent between social media as well as the real world are the things that people tend to judge. So when we're trying to form impressions of you in the real world and the impressions we're trying to form of you in social media. So these are a couple of key traits. For example, are you competent? Do you have credibility? Are you trustworthy? Are you warm? Are you likable? These are similar traits. The only difference is that the cues are different. So on social media, one, as I mentioned, is intentional. So you kind of curate that. Now, there are pros and cons for doing that. Pros is that you can kind of curate something. But if people think that, oh, you're strategically projecting this image, but that's not your real self, then it backfires, right? In the real world, if we come and encounter you in multiple contexts, then we judge for ourselves, are you consistently warm or are you just warm towards me because I'm the client, I'm the boss, and to anyone else, you're a nasty person. And so we form those cues consciously, unconsciously across both mediums, but just that the cues are very different, the context is very different. And so you got to be mindful of some of these cues in terms of like when it comes to impression management. What do you want to present? But you must present it in a way that people perceive it to be authentic. The moment they don't, you lose it.
Yeah. So one thing that was very interesting in your research about self-promotion was that there are right ways to post and wrong ways to post. And by that, I'm referring to your findings that you can either be motivating people or some people might be threatened by what you're writing, depending on whether they're a peer.
In that stream of research with my former PhD student, Kelly Nolt, a professor at IE Business School right now, we wanted to explore impression management from the side of the observer. You know, many times when we think about sharing about attributes or achievements about myself, we always think from a self perspective. When I want people to know this about me. At the same time, you feel good about that. But we wanted to shift the lens into the impact that observers have when they see your post or when they hear you or observe you engaging in impression management. And we wanted to see not just whether they know about the information about you, but rather how does that impact their psychology? How does it make them feel, their motivation and all of that? So we realized that the phenomenon is way more complex than we assumed. One thing we notice is that it's not just that, hey, when you talk about achievements, people view you in a certain way. It impacts the motivation, it impacts their emotions, depending on your relationship between you and the observer. And it's very dynamic in our complex social world. So for example, if you are a boss and I observe my boss bragging, that's very different from observing a peer bragging. So a very consistent thing that we find is that we observe a peer sharing about achievements and all that, we feel threatened because we're comparing ourselves with them. Like, oh man, I want to be like them. So their emotions are envy, demotivation to some degree. Now, by contrast, when we observe a superior who we don't usually compare ourselves with, is your boss or somewhere else, we generally, not always, get more positive emotions like inspiration and motivation and so on. I say generally because it doesn't always happen. It happens only when you respect the boss. So if the boss is like a role model, that's one thing. Second, the boss is bragging about achievements that are achievable. If the boss is going to brag, my boss brags about his height, he's taller than me, there's no way I'm going to feel motivated. There's no way I can improve that. But more importantly also, if the boss is able to share about the journey he or she got there, and that's crucial because it helps me understand, hey, the things that you are sharing about achievements, I may potentially do that too. I therefore, there's a roadmap that allows me to follow and inspires me, it feels more motivated. So all these dimensions would then influence in a very complex way how I feel towards you when you try to share about your achievements.
But I would disagree that you should ever talk about your achievements on LinkedIn in that way because it's humble bragging. And humble bragging is the best way to get cancelled on LinkedIn.
Humble bragging only works when you say, oh, I worked so hard. I don't really want this job. I got promoted. That's humble bragging. No, when you talk about achievement, I'm going to say, oh, I won this award. I'm amazing. And not that way, right? And in many forms where you're sharing about positive characteristics of yourself, to me, that's bragging. However, some people will also perceive self-promotion as bad. But what is self-promotion? Is sharing positive things about yourself or your achievements.
Not always positive. Sometimes the best posts are actually where you show basically weakness and you show where things went wrong. In fact, they often are the ones that go viral is when you talk about how you overcame cancer or basically you got demoted or you basically had setback or you were bankrupt and you recovered. Those were often the best posts because as you said before, people learn from them much more than if you say, I got promoted to this role or I won this stupid award which I paid for anyway. Or that's the worst thing when you see people winning awards, but the way award itself is actually fake. And then no one can basically think, well, it's just a paid for award.
Well, there are two things here. One is that you're lying because the award was fake. Second, you're not self-promoting when you're sharing vulnerability. That won't work.
Who's posting about that?
Oh, that's humble bragging.
They do all the time.
Really?
So to the extent that your vulnerability allows people to understand, hey, the difficult path that you've went through, and I may be going through something similar, and I find I can identify with that, that helps me. But to realize, if I start realizing, oh, actually you're faking it, or it's a fake vulnerability, or you're humble bragging, that flips. So knowing very clearly what self-promotion is and when sharing weaknesses, there are very different ways of posting or different ways of sharing those information.
Also, you have to be in touch with the sensitivities as well. Like, for example, if you post them now about how much money you're making when other people are struggling to even pay their bills, you're completely out of touch with reality and then potentially out of touch with your customers or your clients or your peers or your employees. And that's the wrong thing to do.
Although maybe it's more of a sort of Instagram, TikTok thing. I find it quite satisfying when someone says, I made $100,000 this year.
Really?
Here's how. Yeah, I want to understand the process. You don't?
No, I don't.
He makes more than that.
We would never tell a client to do that because we would know that they'd get more polarizing posts and people would be more annoyed with them than basically any benefits would come as a result of that. If they, however, said, I built this business over 5 years and this is how I did it, but didn't go into how much money they made, that's a more acceptable way of doing it as long as they're sharing lessons on what they did right, what they did wrong, what they learned along the way, the mistakes they made. And that's a bit more humble without actually saying, I'm a millionaire kind of thing. Because as soon as you start saying, I'm a millionaire, here's my Ferrari, move to Dubai.
So, Andy, if you're thinking about, right, I don't want to be threatening, I want to be sharing valuable content, is there a certain way to be showing up?
Yes. So when people post online, they often think about themselves. I want people to know that about me.
Yeah.
I think you should use a different lens, a very similar lens that we use in our research, which is the kind of impact you're trying to create on other people that observe your posts or observe your self-promotion behavior. Think about, someone once told me, think about one of my mentors, a professor at Berkeley, Dana Carney, mentioned, when you're trying to post online, think about the gift that you're trying to offer to people. What are you trying to solve that other people may want to know the answer to? Does it help them understand something more about something they want to know about? If it does, then you can get traction because then people, okay, I learned something more about myself, about something else. Try to use that as the lens rather than, hey, I want people to know that about me. You can actually do that indirectly by helping people solve, challenges or things that they want to know about.
Another way of doing that without actually talking about yourself is to have an opinion on like a local event or a local news item, for example, because that would get the best traction. Basically, there are a series of people like me who post about news items in Singapore for a very reason. Everyone has an opinion on what happens in Singapore. And that's not talking about you, it's talking about your opinion on what happens, but then it's opening up to other people and say, well, what do you think about this? Because your opinion is going to be different to mine, your experience is different to mine. And that's the way to get good engagement.
When you post about about things like that and the personal posts that you were mentioning before. I mean, there's a criticism that sometimes comes up about LinkedIn that people are using it more like they used to use Facebook.
But it shouldn't be a criticism. It should be a compliment, because ultimately, I get it all the time. I get numpties basically on LinkedIn saying, you can't post like that. You can't post about this because it's a professional platform. And I say, well, it's got 400,000 views and 100 comments and 200 likes. Well, I think you can, because I posted about something that was about business and it died. It got 100 views. I posted about this and it went viral. So look at the data. And the data says when you post something interesting about Singapore, for example, in Singapore, or something polarizing from a personal point of view, it's going to get traction. If you just post about your company, it's not. So LinkedIn is not, you shouldn't see LinkedIn as purely a professional network. You should see it as a network amongst professionals who want to talk about topics. You can talk about anything you want on LinkedIn. That's the whole point. Until the point when someone says, basically, no one's engaging with that post, which you can see for yourself, then you stop posting about it. But as soon as people start posting about it and start commenting on it, keep posting about it, because the data is saying that people are interested in this. Yeah. That's why all my posts, all my top 20 posts of every single week are about local issues. It's not about my company. It's not even about a business issue. It's about locality. It's about topics of conversation that people are having in the street, at a hawker center, over the water cooler, in the office, in a bar. That's what people are talking about on LinkedIn. And no one can tell anyone what that should be or what that should not be, because the market will decide.
Yeah.
Again, I emphasize the business is different. For his business, it makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
You need likes, you need comments, you need traction. And to do that, highly emotional content, very highly opinionated content, controversy breeds cash. But for regular Joe, anyone on the street and who wants to build a LinkedIn profile and have a regular job, you need to be mindful too about the content. You have to be responsible for the content you post. I'm not saying that you cannot post personal opinions. You can. But it's going to create the reactions that, as I described, on observers very differently. But your business is different. If you're running a business like Chris, then it makes sense for you to go viral. But I don't know if everyone out there wants to go viral, simply from their opinions.
They don't.
When they have a job and they have to be mindful about the public image of their job as well. Have you seen over the years across Twitter and all the other social media platforms where you post something very opinionated, that high levels of negative criticism, you might get into trouble with your organization too, because you represent your organization too.
Correct.
Yeah.
And more importantly, as Andy mentioned there, if you have a contract with your organization and your contract says you are not allowed to post, or you're not allowed to post about these particular areas like politics, for example, then you obviously can't. Otherwise, you might lose your job. But obviously, being an entrepreneur like myself, like I can post what I want to. And most of our clients are entrepreneurs or individuals who basically are mindful of what they can and cannot post. We've got many people in financial services who can't post what they want to post because they're in financial services, or they work for government, or they work for in the legal profession, for example, or something sensitive, or management consultancy. And they know their clients don't want to hear their views on local issues. I mean, we tell our clients all the time, be authentic, be authentic. We don't care what it is, be authentic, because ultimately people, as Andy said, can see through if you're not authentic.
This is the question. How authentic, how out there can you be? And thinking specifically about someone in their second act, they're wanting to put their best foot forward in whatever new venture it is that they're doing. Ultimately, how do they do that?
You have to have a strategy. You can't just post willy-nilly. You've got to have a strategy about what you actually post. The people who basically post the worst, the people who do one post, it goes viral, they don't do another post for 3 months, and everyone goes, well, what happened? What happened? You basically, besides it goes like that, and it goes like that. Because basically the LinkedIn algorithm is wanting you to post more, because only 1% of people on LinkedIn bother posting. So immediately you post, you're part of the 1%. But LinkedIn wants to show conversations that actually happen with your conversation, with your post. So you have to be authentic, but you also have to be mindful, as Andy said, in terms of who and where you actually are. So in Singapore, we obviously have lots of laws about what you can do from a racial point of view, religious point of view, and you will never, ever get me doing any posts about that particular side of things, because then you can be put in jail. So who wants to basically end up there? And it could be terminally damaging for your personal brand. Whereas the same post in America will probably go viral in certain states and certain places. So you have to be mindful about where you're targeting, who your clients are, where your clients are, and where you want to engage them. So I would say you be authentic as much as you want to be authentic, but there's a line, and you have to know your guardrail in terms of that line, because if you go beyond it.
Maybe like personal brand in Singapore, like you want to be noticed here, but you don't want to be too out there. Like what?
I only created a mohawk to get noticed in Singapore because no one knew me when I came over here 20 years ago. No, I had spiky black hair in London. I came over here, no one knew me. And so basically I went to the hairdresser and say, what's the haircut that'll get me noticed in Singapore? And she said, having a mohawk. I said, okay, mohawk. And then since then,
Really?
basically, Then basically I did not have a mohawk. And then basically I had it. And then people started pointing at me in the street going, oh, you're the mohawk guy. You're on LinkedIn, are you? You do some kind of LinkedIn-y thing. And now that happens all over the world. I get noticed in Australia, in China, in Europe, in America. People go, oh, you're the LinkedIn guy. You're the mohawk guy. They don't know my name at all. They just know me as the mohawk guy. But it's branding. It works. Then someone goes, oh, how can you help me on LinkedIn? Job done. Free marketing, free advertising. But that's why you have to be comfortable, as Andy said before, you have to be comfortable that I'm a marketing entrepreneur and we do personal branding. You know, if I didn't do something like this, then I'm not a very good lesson for my clients in terms of what you can do, what you can't do. I'm not saying my clients have to do what I do.
Do they all have a mohawk?
No, I wish. That'd be great, wouldn't it? If all my clients, I make them all have mohawks. But you can't. But some people actually say to me, but I don't want to have a mohawk. I said, no, we're not going to make you have a mohawk. We're not going to make you post certain things. We're not going to make you do this. We're going to basically hone a personalized marketing strategy for you. We listen to what you do. My team, I'm not even involved in the onboardings. We have an onboarding team. We have an account team. And we have an account manager. We have a head of content. We have writers who will talk to you about what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, and we personalize the strategy from there because it has to be personalized because ultimately, as Andy said before, you're posting for a reason. You're not posting for the sake of it. You're posting for an objective, especially on LinkedIn. Maybe the other platforms you are, but on LinkedIn, there's an objective behind it. Ultimately, there is a business reason why you're doing it.
When it comes to signaling like competence, warmth, and trust, how should people be thinking about how they're wanting to present themselves on LinkedIn?
So as we talk about authenticity, remember, it's a judgment, it's a perception. Sometimes people tell me, I'm very authentic. That's how I present myself. But if people don't perceive you to be authentic, then are you authentic in the first place? Now, the interesting thing about social media is that we have very little cues. So what we often look out for are consistency in your posts. But at the same time, if we get to know you and realize that, hey, you're actually a very different person from your actual person, then you lose it completely. I've interacted with a lot of people where talk about, oh, I'm a good leader. I'm psychological safety is a very important thing. I make my employees feel safe. At some point where I meet some of the employees that I don't feel safe with my boss, you lose it completely. So the other thing that we've been talking about is going viral. I think that's important, especially for certain businesses, as well as for public figures who need traction. They need exposure. So that's when likes or comments and all, those are very important things. But I'm also thinking of other people who are not, like me. I'm not a public figure. So do I want to post many, many times a week? Do I want all the likes and all that? Because in some ways, if the organization realizes, oh, you're spending so much time on LinkedIn, are you even working in the first place? That becomes tricky. So it's all about finding the right balance and knowing what you want as you post on social media.
So it's the mohawk guy that's writing it.
No, but his business, it makes absolute sense because that's his business.
No, but we get clients. We do get clients who basically their peers say to them, God, you write a lot on LinkedIn these days, aren't you, basically? But they don't know that we're doing it because we keep it confidential. But they're saying, aren't you doing any work? Why are you basically... And they even say to us sometimes want to go down from 5 posts a week to 3 posts a week because they're conscious of it. And we point out the algorithm actually doesn't favor this because only 16% of LinkedIn users actually use LinkedIn on a daily basis. Only a third use it every month. So if you post only once a week as opposed to once a day, you will literally damage your reach and damage the amount of engagement you get. So that's why you do need to actually post every day. We advocate. And that's why I post multiple times a day. And that's why Saturday is my best day. Because you know what happens on Saturday?
No one else is
posting. No one else is posting. You get greater share of voice, but people are still looking at this. Like literally, when people say over Christmas and over New Year, people, I'm going to take 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off. We ramp it up. I had several posts get millions of views over Christmas and New Year because no one else was posting. And I was still putting out polarizing posts and they were taking off. I had record views. That was absolutely fantastic. I won clients over Christmas, New Year when other people were on the beach and because they're still looking at their LinkedIn like this, even though they're supposed to be not working. So you do have to be thinking about not just yourself, but also about your audience when it comes to who's sharing and who's viewing the content.
So I have a question here. I mean, you mentioned just now about some clients, you ask them to post and then you help them with the posting, right? So what happens if people find out, or people among the clients, your clients' network finds out, oh, actually, you're not the one posting, and you got someone else posting?
Well, they can't find out unless they basically, because we never tell anybody because we're under confidentiality agreement.
Well, they might find out if you realize that your posts are so amazing, but then in person, you're not that polished. What happens then? I mean, I raised that because we're talking about authenticity, and that becomes a great question.
Right? I mean, ultimately, it is our client's words because we interview the client, we basically write it for the clients. We never use AI, for example. We're interviewing you, we're transcribing it, we're editing it, we're doing the graphics and so forth. So ultimately it is you, but even some of our clients are surprised how they sound. And we've had clients go, that's not me. And we go, literally, it is you. Literally, it's your interview. We just edited it down. Literally, and these are your words. Go, no, I can't say that on LinkedIn. It's like, well, so you do have that situation. And sometimes clients actually are so proud of their post going viral, they will actually tell their peers or their friends that they're getting a team like Black Marketing to do it for them, because they're actually quite proud about it. And that doesn't damage that actually, because they still say to them, it's my words. I don't have time to do it. Therefore, I'll give it to Chris's team to do it.
When someone comes to you and says, I don't know what to post, how do you start?
That's easy. Basically, just start asking them questions about what their clients would like to see them post about. And then you get on a roll, and then you go, well, what else do you want to post about? Do you want to post about your, have you got kids? Are they at school? Yeah, my son won an award the other day, or plays soccer, or my football team won, or I like F1, or whatever. Brilliant. That's 3 posts. That's 4 posts. You like music? Oh, 6 posts. You go to a restaurant? That's 7 posts. Literally, whatever is out there in the ecosystem, you can post about. And then basically, then you on to local issues. Say, okay, take an issue of the Straits Times, for example, and pick out 3 topics you have strong feelings about. Okay, we'll post about that for you. We'll interview you. I've now got 2 weeks of content. I mean, literally, content is the easiest thing in the world. That's why I do 6 posts a day. I could easily do 60 posts a day. Because I love it, and I can see the engagement I get. I measure it and I monitor it. And our clients are quite happy with between 1 and 5 posts a week, depending on the package they bought us, for example. But ultimately, the more you post, the more engagement you get, the more clients you'll get. It's not rocket science.
But on the point about imposter syndrome, if you just start thinking about what value can I give to my audience, rather than, I guess, like the bragging stuff, but if you think, right, I really want to help people, like these are some of the really interesting things I've learned, I really want to share that. Like the self-doubt kind of melts away.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Literally, we have, and it's a sex thing here as well. Unfortunately, I will say this: women are the worst. Not the worst. That's the one thing to say. Women get imposter syndrome far more than men. We do have men with imposter syndrome, but we have 10 times as many women. Therefore, we have 10 times more male clients than we do female clients. Because obviously, you're coming to me going, "I want to post, but I have imposter syndrome. I'm not sure what I want to post about," and then we try and force you to post. And you go, "No, no, 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 no." Eventually we go, we can't help you. We literally can't help you. You've got to get over that yourself. We're writing it for you. It's your words. It's your achievements. The lessons will be inspiring to people. We go through all the positives and the benefits of doing it. Ultimately, if you're not comfortable with it because you have imposter syndrome, you are not one to post. And then you post and go, I got this reaction. I don't really want that reaction. I'm going to stop post. And we have more female clients who take social media breaks, even though they're not writing the social media, we are, than we do male clients. We have no male clients taking social media breaks, but we have women going, oh no, I don't want to post anymore, I just can't do it. That's a personal thing for you have to sort out yourself.
I guess it's sort of a digital version of standing on a stage and sharing something,
Absolutely.
right? Like you feel a bit.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
But let me break it down a little bit what imposter syndrome is. So just in case some of my audience may not be aware. So imposter syndrome is not something that some people have. Most of us experience some degree of imposter syndrome. Not because, well, thank you.
Everyone except Chris.
And sometimes it's good. So it's not always bad. Because one thing about imposter syndrome, people who don't have imposter syndrome is sometimes they are overconfident. People think they think they're amazing and people don't. So imposter syndrome happens when other people think that you're great, but you don't think that you're good enough.
Yeah.
And that happens in transitions. And especially for people in the second act, they may be going to something different, a completely different field.
Yes.
And so I do encounter people with imposter syndrome in my classroom, and I have to help them understand what it is and how to overcome some of these things. And you might feel some degree of imposter syndrome. It means that you're actually learning something.
Yes.
If you're not feeling uncomfortable, you're not learning anything. You're not growing. So growth is uncomfortable to that extent. Now, the other thing to know about imposter syndrome, you can overcome it with enough experience in the space. Secondly, if you have mentors who probably also had imposter syndrome at some point in their career to advise you about their own journey. So here's one about, sharing vulnerability, where I can talk about, the time when I first started teaching, fresh out of college or fresh out of university. How does it feel? And sometimes people think, oh, you're a superstar right away. No, we all go through some of that. This is exactly what we find in terms of when you share about achievements, but share about how you can achieve it too. It makes people feel better and help people understand and feel inspired by you. And that's how you, in some ways, overcome imposter syndrome. So over time, you actually will do that.
Yeah.
Why do more women have imposter syndrome than men?
I think that's a myth, isn't it?
Really?
I don't know if there's data, but I don't do research on imposter syndrome. So I don't know if there's data.
So I've interviewed people that have done they spent their careers researching imposter syndrome, and it is a myth.
Really?
More women. Yeah.
Okay.
It's also tricky. Maybe perhaps, in your sample, more women are like to report that they have, and men are less like to report it. Doesn't mean they don't have it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a reporting error too, and we don't know. I don't have personally don't have data to support that.
I've never had imposter syndrome in my life. I've never had self-doubt about what to do because I've always been in marketing. I always loved marketing. Part of selling, which every entrepreneur does, whether they like to call it selling or not, every single person is doing it. You have to believe in your product and believe in yourself. If you have imposter syndrome, how can you convince someone else to buy your service?
But I think that's a different thing. We're sort of slightly going off topic, but I will just say, just because it's going to make me laugh to see your face when I tell you this, I interviewed an Ivy League psychologist who told me that anyone who doesn't feel any self-doubt or any imposter syndrome, it's a big red flag. It's a big red flag. They are mindless. I think deluded narcissist was a term that was used.
Well, I do have the Joker tattooed on my arm. So
Well, we're not saying that you need imposter syndrome to learn. It's possible that you don't have imposter syndrome and you keep learning at the same time. So you're not wrong in saying that. But what I'm saying is that if you do have imposter syndrome, don't beat on yourself too much. Understand how to overcome it.
Yes.
And there are ways you can do that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the clock and just thinking, I want to make sure we're rounding this off really nicely. So thinking about who is listening to this conversation right now. So we're going to have people who've spent years in corporate. They're moving on, they're pivoting. They might have imposter syndrome because it's normal in times of change to have to feel a little bit of that. And they want to know how to communicate their value, showing up on the digital stage that is LinkedIn. And they want to do this really well. What's some of the advice we can give people?
Well, I mean, for one is know who you are, know your strengths, know about your history, your accomplishments and all that.
Yeah.
Don't discount that. But at the same time, know about where you need to still grow in, especially if you're pivoting to something brand new.
Yeah.
So there's some new research by colleagues in Wharton who suggests something called a credibility disclaimers. So what they find is that, if I'm going to a new space, for example, and you're a senior executive, but you're going to a new industry, for example, and people are aware that you don't have experience in this industry. So one way that people can potentially overcome it is just fake it. But that's not going to happen because people are aware you don't have and people know you're lying blatantly, right?
Yeah.
So you probably shouldn't be doing that. So what they find is that if you are honest about the space or the places that you have weaknesses and you have lack of experience in the space, I'm learning more about the space, but also show that, you have your unique perspective that can be enhanced or harnessed in the space, people would trust you more when you self-promote at some point. Because now they know you're actually honest about it. You're not saying you're amazing all the time, but acknowledge it, show your unique perspective, and then grow into that space, and people are more likely to trust you when you eventually talk about how, your achievements in that space. So be honest with yourself, at the same time, know who your audience is. And as I mentioned before, if you can provide something for your audience, say, hey, I actually really like reading this post, not because I get angered because their opinions are very different, especially in this setting. The goal here is different. I'm not getting viral in this case.
Yeah.
My plan is not to go viral, but the plan is to help build that community around me that I want to draw. You don't want to get masses, millions of people, that you want to draw the right community you have. Then you want to be true to yourself because people are able to identify whether you are the same person online as you are the person in real life.
But ultimately, I would say people buy people. And so you have to project and you have to promote and you have to put out their content. And don't forget, people don't look at content like me and Andy looks at content on LinkedIn and analyze it. People normally go do for a couple of minutes a day, if you're lucky, or a couple of hours basically every month. I mean, the average time on LinkedIn a month is 45 minutes. 45 minutes a month. That's less than Facebook, TikTok, YouTube get a day. Because people still see it as a professional platform. That's why you do need to have more social stuff, more what you used to call like Facebook stuff or content or personal stuff or passion stuff. And you need to say the same thing several times to get over the fact that I still get people coming to me after 14 years of doing LinkedIn marketing, where my entire profile is about LinkedIn marketing saying, what do you do? And they basically say, they start off by saying, I follow you, but I don't know what you do. It's like, how can you don't know what I do? It's like, but it's a reminder.
You write about politics, maybe that's why.
But every single post I do at the bottom is a call to action with our services.
Okay.
For that very reason, because I realized 5 or 6 years ago, people didn't know what I did. It's like, okay, I put a call to action at the bottom there. But still people say, I follow you, I read everything, I don't know what you do. It's like, so it's a reminder to keep yourself grounded and say,
they're not finishing the post. They're not reading to the end.
But there's potentially that. But there's also, you have to basically find ways to communicate on a continuous basis.
Yeah.
So I'll give you another example about how to do that. So LinkedIn have these things called newsletters. So you can have up to 5 newsletters, for example. It's a great way of basically targeting specific audiences with different passion areas. So, for example, I have 5. One's about Singapore, which is the one that's the most popular. Then I have one about being an entrepreneur. So I'm targeting entrepreneurs who are my client base. Then I'm targeting people about how to become a LinkedIn rock star. So I'm an expert on LinkedIn, how to do LinkedIn. But then I have two which have nothing to do with business at all. And to my surprise, they've nearly got 7,000 people subscribing. I think, really? 7,000 people want to know about what I think about Newcastle United, who are my team, or about Metallica, which is my other one. So I have like literally a metal newsletter goes out every week to 6,000 people, and it's on LinkedIn. But then people who then look at metal and then see that also see that I do LinkedIn marketing and go, I like your Metallica stuff. Oh, let's talk about what you could do for my business. We have a number of clients who also like metal. I have clients who are Newcastle United fans or football fans because they read my Newcastle United one. And that's what you've always got to bear in mind. Like, you're talking to people. Ultimately, people are on LinkedIn. There are 3 million people on LinkedIn in Singapore. 3 million. So you think about that and you think about they are covering all walks of life, all jobs, all areas, and they're just people. They're like meeting someone in a bar. It's no different whatsoever, or a cafe or a hawker center or restaurant.
Yeah.
You're literally just meeting people.
Right. Can we leave listeners with an action step? Thinking if someone's they're gonna close their laptop, close their phone after listening to this, and they're gonna go away and think, right, I'm gonna start taking LinkedIn seriously. It's time. And maybe they're just going to carve out sort of 10, 15 minutes just to sort of plan things, not posting it, they're just planning. What do you think they should be thinking about before they get started?
Before they do any content whatsoever, they need to complete their profile. So the number one mistake that people make is they basically start spamming people without a complete profile, without doing content. We have a 3-stage process. You have to complete your profile first, because 90% of people on LinkedIn have incomplete profiles. 90%, they don't have a services section, or they don't have the 5 banners or a custom button or the featured section, or they're not using the featured section properly. They've got a post there from 4 or 5 years ago, for example, or they haven't got the newsletters up there. So you complete your profile first, so it actually says what you do and what you can do for someone. Then you create a content marketing strategy along the 4-1-1 that I mentioned, and then you do the outreach. And it's that 3-step process, and it takes a bit more than 10 minutes.
Okay, not a 10-minute job.
Definitely not a 10-minute job.
All right.
Well, begin with the end in mind. What's your purpose of posting on LinkedIn? Okay, once you know what it is, know who you are, complete your profile, and then know your target audience and think about what kind of expertise and credibility and whatever thing you have that you can share to that target audience that you want.
Yeah.
Have that very clear in your mind. That's when you can start posting.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, both of you. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you to everyone watching and listening, and see you next time. Thanks for listening to The Experience Exchange. I'm Pippa Woodhead. If you're thinking about or starting a second act career, have a look at the other episodes in this series. They've been designed with you in mind. And if you're in Singapore, come visit The Experience Exchange on Ang Siang Road, where these conversations happen in person. See you next time.